Hello everyone, my name is Fernando Gonzalez and I want to thank you all for being here today. We're just starting our webinar on key design principles to improve your revenue. I would like to introduce quickly Belatrix, who we are. We are software product experts. That means we help companies ideate, create, and improve software products to acquire, delight, and retain happy clients. That's going to be all. And I'm also here with Barbara, who is one of our UX experts.
Had very good results and very nice experiences on this thing. So hope that's it for me.
All right, thank you. And before we start with the content for today, just a few housekeeping items. We will use the last minutes of this webinar to go through the questions. So we invite you all to post your questions using the chat feature of GoToMeeting, or you can also use Twitter to send your questions or comments. And also, when this webinar is over, we will share the recording and also the slides in case you want to have them. All right, so just going to the content itself. Today's webinar is about user experience, and this term has become key for achieving customer engagement and retention. But we've seen that there's still a lot of misunderstanding or people don't agree usually in what exactly UX is, and then tend to confuse it with graphic design. So, Barbara, can you explain this a little bit?
Yes, Fernando, thank you. Well, this is a good point for starting. First of all, I wanted to talk about a little bit of what is graphic design. So to avoid and what graphic design is part of a greater field, which is design general. And design is about a realization of a concept using some other tools that could be configuration, drawings, model, but it's always about a plan. So graphic design, as it is always about a plan, about something else. The idea is to solve problems, and these problems are actually communication problems. So this is not about how a message, a graphic message could look, but it's about what we are going to say to a specific audience. So the part that most people know about graphic design, which is the aesthetics and the colors and the more art part, it's just a little part of the whole thing that graphic design is, and it just is another tool to get to our audience and to make an impact on them. So we can say that graphic design it's not art, because art expresses beauty and feelings. Art is about that. But on the other hand, design, it has a specific function, which is communication. We need to get to our audience. We really don't care how the message is conceived, if it is beautiful or not, but the idea is that our audience perceives it that way. So we tend to think that art is a little more subjective, and design could be a lot more objective. These are the main differences that we can see between those disciplines. And we can say that art is more like a transformative experience, and design is more like a communicative experience. Art focuses on the likeness and amuses, and design tries to inform, communicate, and instruct. Good art inspires, and it two different audiences. And artists choose their own way on how to express the message they want to express, while this design is determined by the audience. I mean, it's not the same thing to send a message to kids than it would be to send a message for grandparents. So we need to use different kinds of visual languages. If we want to think what a good design could be, and if we could get some measurements, we could measure the way an audience has been impacted by our message, not if the message looks good or it doesn't. So those are the main differences between art and design.
All right, perfect. So for what you're sharing here, design is closer to UX than art, right? So what is the concept of UX?
Exactly, that's a good point. Well, nowadays everybody has some notion about what UX is, so we are not going to go very deep into the definitions, but we just want to say that this concept was created by Donald Norman in 1995, and his main concern was to address all the things that impacted the whole user experience, not just the UI, which is, I mean, the colors or the layout, but all the things that once a user had finished using some digital product was happy or not happy because of what he has been through. So we have some similarities between UX and design, and we have mainly two. One of them is that both UX and design are human-centered design. UX focus on the user, while design always is thinking about the audience. So as you cannot have UX without a user, there is no design without an audience. Another thing that both disciplines have in common is the process. On the up of the screen, we can see the graphic design process. We can see that we have a strategy, then we have a concept, then design, and then execution. And in the UX process, we can see we have analysis, design, evaluation, and implementation. Both are very, very similar. The main difference here is that in the UX process, evaluation is one step itself, different from the execution, because in the graphic design process, we have the evaluation part inside the execution. And that is mainly because when we work with UX and digital products, we have access to real users. So this is a very good advantage because we can test our designs and our products before we get to the implementation part. So there's always an interactive process that goes from design, then evaluation, then it goes again to the design panel until we get it right, or at least closer to what the user is expecting from our product. Here is another way to see the UX process. I mean, it's the same process, but it's a little more detailed. And we see the strategy, the scope, the structure, the skeleton, and the surface. In general, people tend to think that graphic design gets into the visual design part, just in the surface of the UX process. But as I showed you before, the processes are very similar. So graphic design, it's valuable that it starts working with the UX area in all the stages of the product, since they start developing personas, they start thinking about the user, the layout of the information, and finally they get to the visual design. But graphic design is definitely not the visuals.
All right, great. So now that we have a clearer understanding of the UX process, I guess that our audience will be benefited if you guide us through how these elements of visual design are used to create better user experiences.
Okay, great. Well, we cannot, of course, go through every different principles and every different elements, but we're going to go to the most important of them, and we're going to go to the image and the type-based design, typography and paragraph, the Gestalt principles, color, and finally a little bit of balance and weight. Well, we already said what graphic design is, that it's about communicating ideas and messages through technology. So we have two elements that are the most basic for all graphic experiences, that is the images and then the type. So we have like image-based design and type-based design. The good thing about images is that they are very powerful and they have great impact in the audience and in the users. But they could have a lot of meanings. So that's when we need the words to make only one message that is related to that image. And mostly in web design and in apps and UX in general, there's a lot of content. So we really need to work with the words and with the content. So in the type-based design, we use only words and only type to send our message. And we could get to very powerful results if we take care of the most important things about type family, about variations, spacing, columns, and all these little things that could make just a little design created in something really good. The most important thing about this is creating hierarchies and guiding the user or the audience to the most important part or the path that we want to guide them through. Here is an example how we can put together images and words. As we said, that images have a lot of meaning. So if we just see the images without a context, for example, we don't see them in a bathroom door, or we don't see the actual words that are beneath them, we wouldn't understand really why are they there and what is the important message that they are trying to send. So as we say, like we're working with words and a lot of content, typography is the main unit of what words are made of, at least for from the graphic design perspective. So we can we have like two main categories about different type fonts that are the serif characters and the sans serif characters. On the left, we have the serif characters that they have like a different ending to the descendants and to the ascendants of the characters. And the sans serif, they have nothing. So they are a lot, they look modern, and the serif characters are more like the classic way. They used to say that they have a lot more legibility, but that was before people started to put words on a screen. I mean, because of resolution issues, it is a lot more readable, the serif characters in a book. But when we use a screen that we have a very lower resolution, the serif could start to mix between each other. So it is a lot better to use the modern characters that are the sans serif types. Also, they work a lot better for small little fonts, and the serif characters work a lot for normal or bigger sizes. Of course, these are not just the two kinds of types that we can find. We have a lot of different fantasy styles that we can use a lot, and they have a very good communication power, but we have to be very careful with the use of it because they are not easy to read, and the eye will get tired as soon as they read 3 or 4 words all together. So we can use it a lot to emphasize the message that we want to send, but just in little parts, for example, titles or logos or very, very small things that can add something to the message but won't mess with the legibility. Another thing to consider about type is the font variations, which are the condensed or the extended versions, the oblique, or it's what is called italic, and the bold. In general, for large text, we need to get into what is called the Roman type, what is the regular. So it is not very thick or very thin, and it's easier to read, and the eye doesn't get tired. But in order to establish some hierarchy, we can use all the other variations that are available. The richer a family is, the richer is the message that we are sending and the possibilities that we have to make a clear hierarchy in our messages. This is an example taken from the New York Times. We can see that it's using Gothic style for the logo, and that's because it wants to send a message that it's something that it's classic and it's old and has some kind of and it's very serious message. And then we see how it uses different kinds of families. We have sans serif for the section title, and we have a serif type that is not a regular serif type, but it's kind of a hybrid between a serif and a sans serif, and it uses for the rest of the content. That's because they want to keep the readability that has the modern fonts, but they want to still stick to the newspaper format that used to have this serif types. Also, we can see how it used the bold cut to emphasize the titles, and the very light for the navigation items. So it's very clean and it's very easy to go through the different parts of this web. So as we said that we needed the type in order to create out words. These words get together in paragraph. In general, they say that 50 to 60 characters per line is a good length for readability, but it may change. It depends on the fonts we are using, it depends on the space between the lines, and it depends on the other elements that they can go through in the page. What is important to know about this is that if we use a very long line, it is difficult for the reader to find the next line that is beneath the line they're reading. And if it is too small, the words start to be alone within each other, so they start to lose the meaning of what they're trying to say. So as I said before, the line spacing is very important for this as well, because when we use a very small line spacing, everything gets mixed up together and it is difficult to read and it doesn't look very professional. And as we get a wider space and a bigger height between each line, we get more air and it looks a lot more professional, and it's like it is well designed. But if we use too much space, the user will get lost between the lines. So we have to be very careful and think about these two things, the length of the line and the space between the lines. Well, this is the alignment that I think that most of us are very used to this, because we use it all the time when we write anything. And we have the center type, and then we have the right aligned, the left aligned, and the justified. In general, what is the most common alignment for us is the left align, for us in the Western cultures, and it's the way it's common for us to read. So it's a more natural, we can find it everywhere, especially when we have like a lot of content and we don't have so many columns to use. And always the best choice is to go with the left aligned. The center aligned was used a lot in poetry and in old publications, but you can still use it in web design and in apps, but in small little paragraphs. Of course, you can combine small paragraphs that are centered with some other longer text that is left aligned. The right align, it's not very common. It's not used. We can see it, for example, in forms. And it's a way to get the label closer to the input so the user doesn't get really lost. But it's actually not the best way of using it. In fact, the best way is just putting the label on top of the input. So it's easier to go through that form. Of course, it would depend on if the length of the input, maybe of the form, maybe you have just 2 inputs, so it's not really a big deal. Maybe you don't have a lot of space, so you have to find a way to reduce it. So always you have to be flexible with applying these kinds of rules. Another place where they use a lot the right align is on vertical navigations, but again, this is not really a good choice. It's always the left align the best choice. The only place where it's very valid and it's better to use the right align is when you are using numbers in a table. So they are very easy to read and easy to see all these numbers. That's the only way that you can use it without fear. And then the last one is the justified alignment that actually it's not being used nowadays in websites. It comes basically from the old publications and the newspapers when they use a lot of columns. But the problem is that to get right to the end, they start to have a lot of gaps between the words. So it is not easy to read. And nowadays with the responsive features that all websites need, it's impossible to have control of this of the spaces you are going to leave between each word. So you don't even think about this one. It's not a good option. So if you want, you can send any questions. We are going to be very happy to answer them by the end of the webinar. Okay, now we're going to go to another design principle that are the Gestalt principles. These are some group of principles that were developed by a German group of psychologists when they were trying to study how perception works and how does people organize two-dimensional elements, and they make them unified wholes and they make sense of these groups of elements. So similarity is the first of this law, and it says that when we have similar objects, we tend to think of them as they're part of the same group. And the other way around, when we have something different, it stands up very easily. This is very used, for example, when we're working with buttons. We can have the same button style for the same kinds of actions, and for buttons that do something completely different, we keep another kind of style. Another principle is continuation. That is, we tend to create some kind of movement with curves and elements that are aligned together. This is more for graphic design to create the idea of movements. Nowadays, with websites, we can create movement. So we use it to indicate that something else is going to happen. For example, we use it on the carousels, on the dots that are on the bottom, that it says that another image is coming next to the one that is showing. And for example, when we have like kinds of wizards or steps that the user has to follow. And another principle is the closure principle, which is that we create the things that are missing there. For example, in the image that is on the right, the real image is that we have 3 circles that they have a part missing. But we tend to see that there's a triangle on top of those circles. That principle is used a lot in icons. icon sets, and we use it a lot to create spinners and these kind of animated little things that our brain tends to complete the figure that it's missing. And the other thing that is very used is the proximity principle, which means that all the elements that are close, they seem to be part of the group. And this is very useful, for example, for navigation when we want to keep it simple and we don't want to add some other elements. Just by putting all the navigation items next to each other, we know that they are navigation things. And the other one is the figure and ground, which says that we tend to, when we see a figure, automatically all the rest of the page tends to go to the background. And this gives us the idea of three-dimensional space in a two-dimensional space. In general, it's not something that we actually use on purpose, but for example, all the fonts are figure, the images are figure, but it's most commonly seen on logo creation. For example, in this case, if we focus on the black figure, we can see a flag, and if we focus on the white figure, we see the E. So it is a very interesting concept to play around with, and it can give us a lot of impact in our messages. And finally, we have the focal point, which says that everything that is different from the rest of the items that are all similar to each other will stand a lot. We can use the shape, the color, the texture, or whatever dimension that we have. And this is very used, for example, for call to actions. When we have like all the elements very similar to each other, and then we add some big color or texture, something that tells the user that that's where they want to click next. Well, now going to another element, we're going to talk a little bit about color. We're not going to go a lot bit into the theory because it's not so needed. But we can say that the color is one of the most powerful tools that we can use to guide our user and to convey emotions and to draw people's attention. Here we have the image kind of color wheel. In general, they tend to represent it as a circle, but I like this one because you can see how the primary colors are the big circles there. So we have the primary colors are magenta, cyan, and yellow. And when we have these pigments and we mix them together, we can create all the rest of the colors in the wheel circle, in the color wheel. So for example, we have purple, orange, and green that are the secondary colors, and they're a mix of the other pigments. All the colors that are opposite are called complementary colors, and they create a kind of vibration when they are shown together. And the colors that are next to each other are the ones who are called analogs, and we use them to create harmonies. When we want to apply these concepts, for example, to text and background, it's important to take care about this issue because, for example, when we are using analog colors that they're very familiar, the text doesn't have enough contrast and it just gets lost in the background. When we are using two shades that are complementary, for example, in the button that it's with a green background and the text is red, we create a vibration that, especially when we're using it for small fonts, it is almost impossible to read and the user gets very tired. But we can find a way to make it better just by changing the hue or the value of one of these colors. For example, in this case, we make the red a lot darker so the vibration is over and you can still use it this way. Another important thing is that white text on top of a dark background, it calls a lot of attention, but it's not as easy to read as a dark text over a white background. So for long text, for long content, it's better to have black text, black font in a white background. Another very important part of the color is that it evokes a lot of emotions, and they're associated with our past experiences. So there are a lot of psychologists studied how the colors feel to people and the way that it influences them in their actions. So basically we can have like different meanings to each color that we can apply to create some kind of environment or idea message in our websites or apps. For example, the green color is very used on the environment-friendly things, so it's a lot of ecological things. Black is used for luxury. Then we have that, for example, for health, they use a lot of white and clean colors that are like fresh, for example, blue and light blue. And then we have pink and red that are related to girls and fashion. And then we have all the grays and neutral colors that are related to more serious things. That's why a lot of lawyer firms tend to use these kinds of palettes. There's another use that is very important of the color. It's like creating codes that will be used to send a specific messages. In this case, we have, for example, the periodic table, in which each type of elements have the same color. So you can identify them very easy, which one is a gas, which one is a metal, and things like that. And we are very used to using this kind of color coding in traffic. For example, the red light, the green light, and all the other signs that we can find in the street. And this use of the color is being very common in UX and website, and it's so common that sometimes we cannot even get away from that. For example, for the alert messages, it's very common to use the red color, so the user gets the attention that something's going wrong. And the links in general are always blue. Of course, that it changes according to the color scheme that we are using, and we can use other colors. But for anyone who see a blue color that stands out from the rest of the color, the elements, they know that that's a link. We use the green color for success messages and the yellow color as warning elements as well. Even, for example, the Bootstrap library has coded these colors, and they use the same kind of labels for that. For example, success is green, information blue, warning yellow, and danger is red. Okay, so that was about color, and now we're getting to our final subject here, that is balance and weight. Well, the idea is that our composition, our page or view, or what we are having on the screen, it's a composition of different elements. And we always need to create some balance, because otherwise the users won't get comfortable with that. They all think that something's going to change, it doesn't look right. So we generally try to get to some balance. And to do that, we have to think of the different elements, mostly like in real life. So some elements look heavier than others, and that may be, for example, for the shape they have, the size, the color, or the texture. And there are four basic ways or approaches to balance that are, for example, symmetrical balance. In this case, we have the same thing that happens on the left side of the screen is going to happen on the right side of the screen. This is a very safe way to create balance, but sometimes it will get a little boring, and sometimes it's not easy to get to, especially when we're working with apps. This is an example of homepage and the way that it's symmetrical balanced. Another approach is to have asymmetrical balance, which means that we are going to try to make both parts of the screen have the appearance of the same weight, but we are not actually using the same kinds of elements. This is better because it's a lot, it has more variety, and it has a lot of movement and energy. And it's most common to have this when we are working with apps. And this is an example that we can see that we have all the text on the top left part, and then we have a little thing on the right bottom part of the screen. And this looks balanced even when it's not having the same kinds of elements. Another approach is the radial balance, which it evokes a lot of movement, but it's not really very used in UX and websites, because you need to create something like this. And basically now with the responsive features, it's not that easy to maintain in different screen sizes and resolutions. So, but of course, it is a good approach, and it would depend on the audience if you need to apply this kind of balance. And lastly, this is like the most difficult balance to get, which is the mosaic balance, in which you will have a lot of different elements that they are not seen to be like ordered in a specific way, but of course they obey to a grid. Nowadays, it is very common to see these kinds of pages where you have a lot of different panels with different sizes, and everything looks balanced, but they have their own sizes and their proportions, and you can establish a lot of hierarchies. So that's why this is one of the most common today that are using for our website. And well, that was about it. So I don't know if you have any questions that you would like to answer, to ask. Sorry.
All right. So first of all, thank you, Barbara, for sharing all this information. I think it's been great. We had a lot of, we have a lot of attendance. So I invite you all to continue sending your questions. We do have some here that we would like you to answer now. So first one says, can color codes work equally worldwide? I mean, so they can be applied to any culture, the same color codes that you mentioned?
Well, there are two different things about that. We have some color coding that is almost universal, which, for example, the traffic coding. I think it's the same in all around the world, and that's why it's been very useful in websites for this kind of alert messages or success messages. But in the psychology side of this, there are a lot of cultures that see that, colors have different meanings to each culture. For example, here in the Western cultures, all the brides get dressed in white on their wedding day, while in China, for example, they get dressed in red. So when you're trying to achieve a psychological effect in a specific culture, you have to research a little bit and be careful about what are the uses, because sometimes they are even completely opposite meanings to the colors.
Mm-hmm. So you definitely need to do some research about the that culture specifically.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. All right, perfect. Then there's another question here. Can I use an unbalanced approach for a financial website that it's aimed to older people? What's your suggestion there?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Of course, you can use it. not unbalanced. It should always be balanced, but I think that you're referring to asymmetrical balance. Yes, you can use it, but you have to be very careful with the other elements that you use so you can get the serenity with the other things. For example, using neutral colors, using big images, a lot of space, big fonts, because elderly people have problems sometimes with the sight. But yeah, definitely you can.
All right, perfect. Okay, and I guess this one is more aimed to the entire process, and it says, how do you recommend we start the process of creating our company's look and feel?
Okay, well, the look and feel in general comes at last. First, you need to, I don't know if you are referring to, for example, your website or your general communication, but you have to, first of all, understand what is your business, be very conscious about which are your values and what is that you want to communicate to your audience. And then once you have that, you have to do some research and see what other companies are doing about that. And finally, you will get all these little research and things will lead you to the look and feel that you are looking for. So it's a very open question.
All right. And in terms of the user experience process, so usually the first step will be to research and be close to your potential customers, right?
Yes, yes. Always you have to know who are you talking to, because you need to talk the same language, even if it's just UX or just design, but always it's about the customer. So I don't know, maybe if your company is sending toys, you will need to use the kids' colors and the kids' typography, but it's going to be completely opposite if you do some financial things. So that's the main.
All right, perfect. And we're gonna read the last question here. And this one says, nowadays all websites look pretty similar, and that's because they follow certain design guidelines or rules. Do you recommend following them to match those patterns, or do you recommend I don't know, trying to do something completely different, or trying to get differentiation from that?
Yeah, in general, it's very important to get differentiation. Of course, that in anything that is kind of related to art, it's influenced by fashion. So in this way, we have this flat design fashion that it has taken over the whole web. And it's okay because it has a lot of good design principles, and they're very good use. But that's the problem, that everything looks the same. And if you don't have some other element that differentiates you from your customers or your competitors, you have like nothing. You're just one of them all. So it is very important to think about what is the value, what is the message you're going to send, and do these little different things that will make sure that you send that message and you have that intention. So yes, you can follow what is established now, but it's always good to go a little farther and look a little more and see what you have that the others don't have, and you can translate that into your design or UX or whatever.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And with that, we will finish today's webinar. I want to thank you all for being here and for being part of this webinar, and also share that we will be sharing the slides and the recording of this webinar in case you want to review some of the content Barbara has shared today. So thank you all and have a great day.
Okay, thank you all for your time and have a great day.
Goodbye.